A couple months ago, I didn't do something, and it has haunted me ever since. Driving down a 4-lane road in very busy traffic, there was a car in the median, doors open, lights on. I didn't call 911. I had many good reasons, of course. I have a smartphone and I don't find it easy to use, so I would have had to spend a bunch of time not watching the road. Someone must have called, I thought. I don't know what the mile marker is, and I couldn't find one. And then I fretted rather than act. I'm deeply ashamed of myself, and I know the importance of acting. As Tim Wise has said, guilt is what you feel because of the kinds of things you've done. Responsibility is what you take because of the kind of person you are. It may be just me, but I suspect many of us don't act as frequently or as firmly as we should. Sometimes people's lives and safety hang in the balance. Not surprisingly, there was a recent study done about this, and a person entered an elevator and was joined by a couple who started to simulate domestic violence. They did this experiment 53 times. One woman finally threatened but did not call the police. The rest looked away or punched a floor to get off earlier. We always think we'll act. We always think we're the ones, but sometimes we're not. We have continued to have the conversation in UU history class about whether we would have persevered in the face of the persecution, and most of us suspect not. It's human. In fact, Yom Kippur has a special message of atonement for Jews to recant vows they were forced to make to stay alive during the year. Is it good that an entire religious tradition be exterminated? They thought not. When the Romans were weeding out Christians early on, they made eunuchs of Christian men so they couldn't propagate. Origin of a North African saint is said to have run to the Romans when they came to emasculate his father and said, "Take me, take me." Few of us are like that. More of us are like a guy in a joke that my brother-in-law used to tell, and a bishop announced from the balcony at the Holy See that the Pope's heart was failing, and he needed a new heart very quickly. Someone stepped forward and shouted, "Take my heart." Not to be outdone, the whole crowd started screaming, "Take my heart." The bishop said, "Oh, how to decide. I know. I'll release a feather, and whoever it falls on will take that person's heart." And the next thing you know, the yelling resumed with one small difference. To a person they yelled, "Take my heart." Let someone else do it. Because what do? Often what we think we should do isn't the right thing. And no, this doesn't get me off the hook for the car thing. I heard Reza Aslan, who is the guy he's a Muslim biblical scholar and religious scholar, and he recently wrote the book on Jesus. What? Zealot, right. And he was on NPR, and he was talking about the Middle East. And he was talking about all the armchair quarterbacking that's going on over here, about what we should do about ISIL and what they should do. And certainly we've all heard, well, the Muslims need to do something. And he says he hears constantly that the Muslims should have a reformation. And he replied, "This is Muslim reformation. This is what reformation looks like." And I thought, humanitarian, why intervene in one place and not another? Sometimes I think we're so used to lying to ourselves and lying to one another that we don't know how to stop and look. It's too dangerous to our sense of who we are. Although what we talk about in this country is the notion of the melting pot. You come here and you're welcomed into the stew. Nonsense. We have story after story of cultures who came here because it was worse where they were, but they came looking for a home. They were grossly exploited and often persecuted. Some of us are appalled at the reception small immigrant children received about a month and a half ago, but it is who we have been since this country started, however much we don't want to look at that. Too often we see people as the other, and to be other is to be less human, and in many parts of this country that's understood as less godlike. Presiding Bishop Catherine Jefferts Shiori of the Episcopal Church says it this way: "The racism in this nation is part of our foundation, and it is not unique to one city or state or part of the country. All Americans live with the consequences of centuries of slavery, exploitation, and prejudice. That legacy continues to lead individuals to perceive threat from those who are seen as other. The color of one's skin is often the most visible representation of what divides God's children one from another." And in fact, Reza Aslan comes from Iran, and he said when he first came here, he tried to pass himself off as Mexican because it was, although that brown was bad, it was a less bad brown than an Iranian brown. So we hope that as a faith community, we can truly become what our chalice says we are, a place of welcome and a place of refuge. But we need to be more. We need to be places of change. This could be a pivotal moment in this country. I woke up the other morning wondering if what's happening in Ferguson and all over the country is indeed a Reformation moment. Is this where some Martin Luther strides into the square, or Martin Luther King, and says, "Here I stand, I can do no other"? And if some person does that, will we hear her or him? They not only killed that child in Ferguson, they left him lying on the street for hours, like trash. They never called his parents. Too many people saw that and responded, "No more." Perhaps things have finally reached a point where the reality has gotten so awful that it can't be ignored. People grumble about the violence at the protest, and it's sad, but it's not the majority of what's happening there. And oh, by the way, let us remember, we are Penn State, complete with looting and burning. Over a lot less. Can you imagine standing peacefully when child after child is killed? Not everyone can manage it. Mostly people are standing saying, "You cannot imagine me away any longer. You cannot pretend that by looking the other way, you don't have to see the ugliness you inflict on our lives. Violence is being meted out by the system from above." Tim Wise, once again, "So long as violence from below is condemned, while violence from above is ignored, you can bet that the former will continue." We can get with the program, or we can become the problem, a sad and sorry part, because we won't even be the antagonists, we'll be the acquiescers. These people are innovating faith and life on the street where it works. You may remember Francis David. This is why he was put to death. He was innovating. It was innovative to say God is one. It is innovative to say Black Lives Matter. They're statements that seem so straightforward, and yet people keep being killed. Children do. At the Mother Church, up there in Boston, the UUA is considering adding an 8th principle. Reads as follows: "The congregations of the UUA affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community that unaccountably or that accountably dismantles racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. Great. We finally learn the words to the song, and then they throw in number 8, and it still has nothing to do with daily life. But it's probably important enough that we could shift to find a new tune. Although I have to say, in reading this, and I would imagine in hearing this, that you can see we're still a little bit uncomfortable with the notion. It shouldn't take 3 lines to say, let us open our eyes, our hearts, and our doors. Is it in us to become an institution whose makeup reflects that of the wider community? Do we have anything to offer people of color struggling in a white-run world? That wasn't easy to say. I don't know. I certainly hope so. I know I'm not the only one among us with family members and friends who are not white. Growing up, my family would not have been the first one I identified for mixed-race marriage and multiracial children. And yet we have them, and I worry about them, particularly our children. There was such a sad article written recently by a lawyer. He and his wife went to Ivy League schools. They earn great salaries. They live in a very protected place. His 12-year-old son went off to spend a summer at camp on something wildly privileged, I don't know, economic enhancement or something. Every 12-year-old wants to learn about. And it was at a prestigious boarding school. And while walking in town, he was harassed by 2 men in a car who drove slowly by, as close as they could, and called him names and threatened him. They used that word. A confident child, he went running back to school to tell an adult, and the camp administration blew him off. And this broken-hearted father had to realize that he could not insulate his son. Not only was his son not safe, too many people were not going to see him or hear him or stand for him. Too many good people. We have to be those who stand. Not standing allows the ugliness to continue. It denies the ultimate beauty of all creation. Every life is worthwhile. It puts us on the wrong side of history. Life will change. I believe, indeed, I fervently hope that this particular dinosaur will be finished off, and soon. That this next wave of civil rights exploration will wash fear and hatred from many souls. We must stand on the side of love. So this next part really isn't as much of a non sequitur as it might sound. You may wonder why a UU congregation lights Advent candles. Well, aside from the fact that Lenore and I like it, which could well mean you're stuck with this habit until we can no longer stumble up front, I may have said this before, but I grew to love Advent first in secular Sweden, and then as a woman living far from her family. Advent was a custom I could keep. I love the dark. And to celebrate in the time of candlelight and starlight, hope, peace, joy, and love is a wonderful thing. I find the practice deepens the mystery of this beautiful season, and I'll take that, always. But this year it has particular poignancy, I think. Our world is in desperate need of those 4 mysterious characteristics. They're good to meditate on, to pray on. Prayer, you say? Yes, prayer is such a bigger word than we often understand or allow it to be. It can be a specific calling on a deity, and for many of us, that's part of our lives. But that's only part of prayer. Prayer is also the emptying of self. It is welcoming the beloved other. It is the gathering of strength and the daily getting up and going about the important work. Day in, day out, with the names of those for whom we work on our lips. Sometimes that's all we can manage, this holding as holy those whom the world reviles. But some days we can do more. I spent a lot of time in counseling learning to stop using this word. But I find no way around this. I believe that as people of free faith that we must. We who believe in freedom shall not rest. We who believe in freedom shall not rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom shall not rest. We who believe in freedom shall not rest until it comes.
Till the killing of black men, black mothers' sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons. Until the killing of a black man, black mother's son, is as important as the killing of a white man, white mother's son. We who believe in freedom shall not rest. We who believe in freedom shall not rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom shall not rest. We who believe in freedom shall not rest until it comes.